Last week I had this great idea. I would write, edit, and publish a scene in 1 week. And then it all fell apart when Shawn said that the scene didn't work and I needed to do a complete rewrite.
I'm probably going to pull the rug out from you a little bit. I'm going to have to give you the truth.
Right, yeah, I'm already rewriting it in my head. Now that was part 1. It's down in the description if you haven't seen it yet. But now I have to rewrite the scene based on his feedback and see if I can level it up to be good enough. And this is actually harder than the first draft. It's harder because I'm trying to figure out what to keep and cut and rewrite, and harder because now there's more pressure. And as I went through this, I got super frustrated working on this scene because, well, I get nervous. What if I write another shitty, unworking scene? What if it's worse? And I've already committed to putting it up here on YouTube, so I have to follow through with it. Well, I said I would do it, so in this video, you're going to track with me to see what I come up with, why I rewrote it the way I did, and then you get to hear what Shawn has to say about it. And just so you know, Shawn isn't some random guy. He's the creator and founder of StoryGrid, and he has a crazy successful 30-plus year track record in the publishing industry. He knows what he's talking about. And if you want to follow along, both the first and the second drafts of the scene are down below in the description. But for now, let's get into this. This is the part I hate. I've got to rewrite this entire scene from scratch. I could try to pull some things out. I could try to edit the version that's here, but it's, you heard the feedback, you heard what Shawn had to say. And every time I've tried to do that where I try to salvage something I've written, it ends up being a disaster. You know, I think I'm going to copy this right here. And then I'm going to make a new document. This is going to be Lovers Meet Scene, Draft 2. And here we go. So I'm going to try to take the feedback that Shawn gave me and incorporate it into a new scene. God, I hate this part. Oh, it's like starting over. It always feels like the gears in my head are just grinding and I can't even figure out how to start. I've added a single word so far. Okay, I don't know, halfway through or something, but I got to go to my next meeting, so pause it and come back to this later. I let the scene sit overnight, thought a lot about it, trying to figure out what I need to do with it to make it work. I think I've got some good ideas for it, so I'm going to dive back in and see if I can get something going here. Okay, I'm actually going to kill everything from here down and start again, see if I can get something going. All right, I'm pretty happy with this, so it's going back to Shawn to see what he has to say about it. I finished up the final edits on the scene and sent it over to Shawn. So I let it sit for several days after I did what was really the third draft, because I got halfway through the second draft and then deleted the whole thing and started over. And I want to walk you through some of the stuff that I did in the scene that I think that Shawn is really going to like. And I should probably do this before I get the feedback from Shawn so that I don't change it later. So the two big takeaways I was thinking was I need both of these people to not like each other and not be the best versions of themselves, because the lovers meet scene is at the beginning of the story. And so they can't be, highly evolved individuals. They need to be at the worst version of themselves because they're going to grow and change throughout the story. I also wanted to throw some sort of hurricane into this scene. Now, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you'll be able to see this version of this scene down in the description. There's a link down there. The first thing I did is make it really clear. I put the inciting incident on the page so that the client texted and requested a coffee stop. That way the inciting incident is right there on the page, and it's easy for people to understand why he's running late, why he's in a hurry. I kept the chalkboard menu with the eclectic assortment of yard sale mugs. And then I put this as the first, both, I wanted to accomplish a couple different things with this. One is I wanted to be the first progressive complication. So when you walk into a place and there's only one patron, you think, and you're in a hurry, you're like, all right, one person, then I'm through. And so I had this patron keep holding up the process to make it take a long time. And I also wanted to show and go ahead and establish that Louise doesn't really know what she's doing. So she didn't make the coffee order right for this patron, which is why it's being held up in the line. The next thing I did was I showed John's impatience. I tried to do my best to show his impatience all the way through this process where he orders, basically yells out his order past the girl that's in front of him. He just urges her to just go ahead and finish the order even though she overcharged him. He got frustrated when he had to type in his email address. And then he got frustrated at her when she's making him take longer for his order. And then down here is where it starts to turn, where she's making the espresso drink and obviously doesn't know what she's doing. And then I wanted to show that he does know what he's doing. So in my mind, he used to be a barista somewhere, so he understands how all this stuff works. But obviously I can't just say that on the page. So I have him start yelling out instructions to her. As he watches her make mistakes, he starts telling her how to do it the right way. And then finally he just comes around the corner. And this is where I keep trying to drop these kind of hints in about his outfit. So he's adjusting his tie up here, and now he takes that tie and he unbuttons a button on his shirt and puts the tie in. So he's trying to like stay nice, even though he's going into kind of this danger zone of behind the counter. He also is continuing to show he's kind of a jerk, right? So he's like, for fuck's sake. And then he says, she says, you can't come back here. And he just ignores her, basically kind of ramrods over her. Then she can't, then there's no, he takes over making the shot. There's no soy milk. He gets pissed again and basically pushes her to just get the almond milk started while he starts again. And then I wanted to have, Shawn said there needed to be some sort of hurricane in it, right? Something big had to happen in the scene. And I was trying to figure out how to do this. And because he was the one that was so adamant to go fast, and she was the one making all the mistakes, I wanted him to cause this final mistake. So he spills grounds on himself and jumps back, bumps her elbow, knocks the steamer wand out, and then burns her hand. And then she drops the milk and it goes everywhere across John's shoes and slacks. So now he's got coffee grounds down the front. His pants and shoes have milk on them. And so then I wanted to start making it look like he was going to be nice. So he steps close to her. Oh, I did do this where I tried to show what he found most important. So several seconds pass as John surveyed first the damage to his clothes and second the chaos around him. Then he stepped close to her. He spoke softly to her, coaxed her over to the sink to start, putting water over it. She slid her hand and wrist under the cold water. He explains to her how to take care of it. Then he grabs a rag and cleans himself up the best he can. And then he says, "It's been a pleasure," he said flatly, then stepped around the side of the counter. "Hey," Louise yelled after him. It was her turn to survey the damage. And she's basically like, "You're just going to leave me like this?" And he shrugs and he's like, "You know what that sounds like? Not my problem." And then leaves. And then, so this is where I would put the climax. The climax, remember, is where the protagonist makes the decision, acts on the decision that he's made. So this is where "It's been a pleasure," he said flatly, then stepped around the side of the corner. So this is where he leaves, where it looks like he's going to stay and help her and just let the meeting go. And that's the crisis. Is he going to stay and fix the problem he created, or is he going to leave? And he decides to leave. And that is directly connected to the inciting incident where he was in a hurry when he came into the coffee shop. I would say the turning point is when the wand burns her hand. So that's where he's got to make a decision about how long he's actually going to spend in this place, because she's now burned. He needs to stay, but he also wants to go. So that would be the turning point. And then the resolution is he walks out the door. So, and I did try to think of this, even though this is not going to be a part of a bigger book, this is just a standalone scene. I did try to write it as a lovers meet scene in a wider book where I actually had him leave his credit card behind. So up here, yeah, he sets the card on the counter and starts punching at the screen with both index fingers. So I tried to just make them both like, she's a complete train wreck, should not be running a coffee shop. He's an asshole trying to get to his business, and they basically run into each other, and she just keeps getting in his way as he's trying to get the coffee and get out the door. So those are the changes I made. I made sure they were both not, this was not meet cute, this was meet angry. They're both not great versions of themselves at the beginning, him more than her. And then I threw in the hurricane where this huge mess happens as she gets burned in the process. So that's what I did. I'm really hoping he likes the scene. I've sent it over to him. I can actually see up here in this red dot that he's now in there reading it. So we're meeting in a few hours to find out what he thinks of my rewrite. I will share that with you next. All right, Shawn. So I did my rewrite from last week and sent it over to you. So what'd you think?
Well, you put a hurricane in there, that's for sure.
Good.
There's lots of conflict. There's lots of surprise. It's, I really don't have much to say about the Five Commandments of storytelling there. They're all clear to me. They were clear to me. I thought the scene was well constructed and not all that noisy.
Okay, I had to stop it here in case you missed that. This is Shawn saying he likes the scene and it works, which, thank God. But of course, there's still more for me to learn. What's coming up next, I did not expect, and you're going to love it. It's a masterclass in writing style. We love talking about style in writing, but what does it actually mean? Shawn is about to explain it, and it's going to change your life. So let's dive back into it.
So you might think, yay for me.
Yeah, I've been doing this too long.
Yeah. But the good news is that now we can start talking about things that people always want to talk about before they even know how to write.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the stuff that we're going to talk about now, is the stuff about style.
Okay.
And it's about clarifying the style of narration.
Okay.
So this has three components to it. Now, a lot of these components, people immediately think they know exactly what they're talking about when they start talking about them, but they're a lot more nuanced than you might expect. Okay, so the first component of style is point of view. A major decision that you have to make after you sort of have a working scene that abides by the Five Commandments, has valence language, that has levels of intrigue, excitement, and catharsis to it, and your scene does. And remember our goal state. I'm remembering our goal state from last week when we discussed that you want to create a scene that could be publishable.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
So publishability is what we're going after, not just practice.
Yeah.
The first stage of publishability was to make sure that your commandments are locked, that there is movement, that there is conflict, that it has a narrative drive based upon the foundational principles of StoryGrid, Five Commandments of Storytelling. Okay, we've got that. Now we want to take it up a level so that it has a coherent style.
Okay.
What does style mean? Well, it means point of view choice has to be consistent and clear, and there has to be a reason why you choose a point of view. I'm going to talk about what the point of view is in a second. The second one are the frames of reference that are inside the point of view. And lastly is the tense of the verb. Okay, so we got three things in style: point of view, frame of reference, and tense. Now, the universe, I know this is a big jump, but the universe has generally three components to it. Okay? There's space, spatial recognition, three dimensions of space. There's time. There's three dimensions of time. And there's essence, right? And what essence is a particular frame of the way you see the world. So Tim's essence is different than Shawn's essence, and it's different than anybody else on the planet. That's what makes you Tim, right? Okay, so we've got space, time, and essence. And so style, we want to transmit space, time, and essence to the reader via our stylistic choices, so that when they hear our writing in their minds, it sounds like no one else they've ever heard.
Okay.
Okay? So that's what a style is. All right, so let's talk about point of view first. Point of view is first person, second person, or third person. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So first person generally means I went to the store, I am going to the store, I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then second person means you go to the store, we go to the store. So second person is a collective, I is an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And third person is a general, or they went to the store. The lumberjacks had their lunch break. That would be third person, right?
Okay.
These are important choices because how your reader or your audience experiences the story will be affected by which choice of point of view you tell them, right? So if you're saying this brings me to frame of reference. Okay, so hold first person, second person, and third person. And let's talk about frames of reference for a second, okay? Now, a frame of reference can be basically how wide of an angle are you relating the story. So the frame of limited, so a limited frame means one frame. So if I were to tell you a story of how I woke up this morning, I would talk about myself the whole time. And then you would see what happened to me through my framing of Shawn. So a limited frame is one person or one character. So we only see, hear, and experience the story through the limited frame of one character. So limitation of frame to a single frame is called limited. Second one, this is called multiple. Multiple is when you have more than one frame in the story. The third frame is omniscient. And omniscient means you've got the widest angle possible. So instead of me trying to explain all this stuff, let me just give you some examples from some famous novels that hopefully you'll be familiar with. And then I can explain to you what each one of these are. So basically you have frames and you have points of view, and then they can intermix. So first person, you can have a limited frame, a multiple frame, or an omniscient frame. So first person limited, first person multiple, and first person omniscient. So a first person limited story would be like Bridget Jones' Diary.
Okay.
A Bridget Jones' Diary, the reader is experiencing the story as Bridget experiences her story.
And only Bridget.
And only Bridget. And so we see the world through Bridget's eyes, and we don't know what's going to happen next, neither does Bridget. Because it's her diary, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The same effect is true in Fight Club. It's
Okay.
sort of a first person limited. It's a really cool trick he does, but generally that's the experience of Fight Club. Okay. So Bridget Jones' diary is first person limited, and the key thing to remember is we are experiencing the story in real time as the protagonist is. Okay. The second one is first person multiple frame. And this is kind of a weird trick, but you would have multiple eyes telling different stories, but they're all talking from their own thing, their own frame of reference, right? So As I Lay Dying, which is a famous novel by William Faulkner, that's like a really good example of first person multiple frame because they're all speaking with first person tense, but each of the chapters is a different character explaining what they're experiencing as they're taking a body to be buried.
Okay.
The third one is first person omniscient frame, and this is sort of like The Book Thief. Did you ever read The Book Thieves by yeah?
I did not.
Oh, you did. Okay. So The Book Thief takes a first person omniscient frame, and actually the narrator of The Book Thief is I think it's Death. Death in the abstract.
Okay, so because that's what I was wondering when you first said first person omniscient. I'm like, how is that a thing? So, and then as you started talking, I'm like, oh, is it like a god telling the story in first person?
Okay, yeah, let me follow up on that. Okay.
Okay.
So the difference between first person limited and first person omniscient is the following. Your novel, The Shithead, that I'm editing now, is actually written in first person omniscient frame. And you didn't even know that, did you?
I didn't. If you had told me to guess, I would have said first person limited.
No. And here's the difference, okay? The difference is that first person limited is you experience the story in real time. So you and the protagonist, who is the narrator, are experiencing the story. Omniscient means a reflection, and so it's more like an argument.
I see. Okay.
So if like say somebody I care about does something stupid, and I remember a story about when I did something stupid, I will tell them a story about when I did something stupid to let them know that people do stupid things. So it's kind of like an argumentative narrative, where there's a purpose, and the ways in which the storyteller tells the story are very specific to build an argument, so to speak. So it feels like there's going to be a payoff, and the trick in this first person omniscient is to surprise what the payoff will be to the audience. Okay. I know this is getting long, but these are the important things to remember when you're writing stylistically. What choices are you making about your point of view? Because these can add a level of information and clarity to the audience that will level up the story from, hey, that was a pretty good scene, to this might actually be a publishable short story. Who knows, right? Okay. So first person, that's really locked. I can tell you about second person, and I'll tell you very quickly because you don't really use it all that often. Second person limited frame would be like Bright Lights, Big City, where you're seeing the world through a character called you. You're walking down the street. You see a stranger. You buy a token to go to the subway. So it's a limited point of view from a single protagonist point of view. So Bright Lights, Big City by Jay McInerney is a pretty classic example of that. The second one is second person multiple frame, and this is more like there was a novel published in early 2000s, maybe late 2000s, called And Then We Came to the End, and it was by a guy named Joshua Ferris, and he used the technique of saying we are about to do the following. and it was sort of like The Office, only in novel form. It was a really fun book, and it was nominated for a National Book Award. It won a bunch of awards and everything. So second person multiple frame would be, and then we came to the end. Okay, the third one is practically never used. Second person omniscient, and the only one I could think of was this, and it isn't even throughout the entire novel, but it was a really difficult novel to read. It was called If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. And this was by Italo, always mispronounce his first name, Calvino. Anyway, Italo, I apologize, Mr. Calvino, if you're still with us. Okay, now let's go to third person. I think he is. I apologize. Anyway. All right, third
I'm
person.
sure he watches our YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
yeah. Dying for my insights, I'm sure. Okay, let's go to third person. I know this is getting long, but these are important things to remember, and nobody ever teaches anybody about this.
Okay.
It's crazy. I had to learn all this myself. All right, third person limited frame is J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I always think of.
Yeah. So
And that's because you're only seeing pretty much 99% of the time. It's just what Harry can see, but it is third person.
Yes. So like she'll use sentences like Harry couldn't believe his eyes, Harry this, Harry that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so that's third person limited frame where you're seeing the world through one protagonist, and the narrator is just sort of like narrating over their shoulder. The second kind, third person multiple frame, is The Song of Ice and Fire, right? So if you read Game of Thrones, which was the first book, each of the chapters shows you the point of view of a particular character in the universe. The last one is third person omniscient, and this is the classic sort of Tolstoy, Anna Karenina point of view, or Charles Dickens, right? So you're getting a very, very wide angle, a godlike presence. So third person omniscient is the widest angle that you can take. So these frames and points of view are very important to understand when you're writing a scene or anything, because you want to be consistent. And each one of them has a particular effect. So you have to think about what effect you would like the reader to have, and then try and match your frame and your point of view with that effect that you're looking for, right? So if you want an intimate, sort of very intense, real-time experience, you might want to go with first person limited. So you see the world through one person's frame, or alternatively, you could go third person limited, and then the effect would be as if I'm telling a story about my friend Tim, who went into a coffee shop. So let's say you're, like we were talking about the last time, when somebody asks you, how did you meet your significant other? You would say, oh, it was fine. We met somewhere else. But let me tell you about how Tim met Candace. Mm-hmm. So Tim's in college, right? And now I'm doing third person limited frame, telling the story of Tim meeting the woman that will become his wife. Did you see the difference?
Yeah.
I met her in college. I'm talking about my friend Tim now. So there's a separation between the immediacy of me telling my own personal story and me telling a story about my friend.
Yeah, I think of like in Hunger Games, it was told in first person limited as if it was happening in real time, which made it feel very close and visceral. Like you don't feel like you have any distance from what's happening. Is that what you mean?
Yes and no. The tenses, which we can get into in a second, that's sort of like on the ground work. So when you're writing sentences, you've got to be clear about the tenses, and you modulate the tense manipulation to speed up the story, to bring the reader along with you, slow them down, fill in the parts that they need to know. So you're modulating a signal using tense, past, present, future. Those are the general tenses, right? But of course, there are four subgroups under each of those. And so we can get to tense in a second, but the main thing to figure out when you've got a working scene before you start modulating, this is what we call the green stuff, right? So the green stuff are the actual words on the page and what's literally going on in the scene. But you need to sort of step up a little bit and think about what effect do you want to focus on one character? Do you want to hold it as multiple? And if you're going to do multiple, do you want to do first person so that we would see the world through Louise and John's points of view? Probably not in a short piece. So I think your choices are first person limited, or third person limited, or second person limited.
How do I make that decision?
It depends upon how close you are to the story. So if you want to make a buffoon or make light of the story, have a comedic style, you can do that with pretty much anything, but oftentimes this is really a stylistic choice by the writer. I can't answer the question for you. You have to investigate what would sound right to you in this particular instance.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like I wrote it in third person. I don't totally know why I picked that other than...
What kind of third person did you write it in? Remember, there are three. Third person limited, third person multiple, and third person omniscient.
I want to say limited, but I think I slipped into multiple. But I honestly, I off the top of my head, I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay.
You see where I'm getting at here?
Yeah.
So if you don't know what point of view you've taken to write a story, that's not going to be very indicative of the reader will go, it was kind of cool. It was funny. I don't know what the point was. Point of view.
Yeah. It's like I think most of it was written in third person limited, but I think I didn't stay on those tracks the whole time.
Right. What you need to do, and I'm not going to give you the answers because why would I do that? Right.
I'm waiting for you to give me the answers.
No, you've got to analyze it yourself.
Okay.
And I'll send you this document that I just banged out that lists all this stuff, and I guess you can share it with the audience because it's not, I didn't make it up. And what you would want to do is take a look at all of your stuff and go, if I had to identify these sentences and say, because you can do this for each sentence. What is the point of view and the frame of reference for this sentence?
This almost feels like if I'm coming up with a recipe and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I can put oregano in the recipe and that's going to take the recipe one direction. But if I put paprika, that's going to take it in a completely different direction. I'm going to get two different meals at the end of one of those things. I'm not much of a recipe writer, so that those may work together. But in this, that's what it feels like. It feels like, okay, if I go third person limited, I'm going to get one kind of a story. If I go first person, I'm going to get another kind of a story. I don't think I want to delve into second person. So what are the effects of those choices?
There are generally three ways we look at the world, right? We look at the world from an individual lens. We look at the world from a general scientific kind of way. And then in the middle, we have a shared. So when you're using first person, you're going down into the individual lens. And so the variation and the differences between individual people are highlighted, and you're giving somebody basically it's like being John Malkovich. You ever saw that movie? Probably no. Oh, you did. Okay. You're enabling people to see the world like another human being who isn't you, right? So you're detaching the audience from the protagonist in such a way that they can laugh and go, "Whoa, thank God that's not me," right? And then the general point of view is is the other side of that. It's the invariance of things that happen to all of us all the time, but they just change form and shape for each of us, right? So we've all gone into a coffee shop and wanted to seize control of the espresso machine because it's the person behind them doesn't know what they're doing, right? But the person you're writing about actually does. So that's interesting and surprising because we would never think to do anything like that. So it says a lot about this particular person that you're describing in the story. He's a very aggressive and very but also there's moments of kindness in him too, right? When she burns her hand and he helps her out. So the middle ground is the shared space between the general and the specific. And so what you need to do in a story is to be very specific under the constraints of general things, general, movements of story. So when I said at the beginning of this call, you've got the general down and the specifics are pretty good. Now we just need to clarify who you're rooting for as the writer of the story. Are you putting yourself, are you presenting John as you? Or are you presenting John as some weird, funny guy that you're going to manipulate and then have him change? Because our characters and our avatars, that the characters that we create, this makes people uncomfortable, but they are versions of ourselves. So how closely you identify with that character will help you make a choice about whether to use third person limited instead of third person omniscient. I just might have given you a clue about the general tenor of your story. It doesn't really give us a full, I'm not sure. I really don't know who you care about more, Louise or John.
Okay, because that was my thinking, is in a love story, aren't you trying to get the reader to care about both?
Let's go back to the goal state. This drives me a little bit crazy because people are always saying, but this is just, a scene. I'm writing a love story. No, you're not writing a love story. You're writing a meet scene that we use lover to get people to understand intimacy, so that, and then people misread it and say, well, it's a lover's meet scene, therefore there should be love at stake. But love is not one thing. It's a connection. And it doesn't have to be a good connection. It's a level of intimacy that's binding. It binds people together, and conflict, whether we like it or not, is what brings people together.
So I want to write this scene.
Here's another thing that's driving me a little bit crazy right now. There's no perfect answer. I don't know what you know. I don't know how you want to do it. There's no well, I guess this is the right answer. It's something that you need to think about and not just say, oh, I'm going to write in third person omniscient, or I'm going to write. You need to say, well, what will this do for me if I use this technique?
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around is what the decisions and trade-offs are with each of the decisions. So I was thinking I would start with, I want us to see the world through John's eyes because I want you to experience what it's like to go through life just trying to get your shit done, which is what he's just trying to do. And this fucking woman is in his way. And she doesn't seem to care that she's in his way, and she doesn't seem to be aware that she's in his way. And so he has to force her to get out of the way. And even in the moment of kindness, it was done selfishly. That is how people go through life, which is why I ended it with him leaving her in a lurch. Thinking through that and everything that you've said about the different things, it makes me go towards third person limited, and I need to focus in on him as the character and the protagonist and the one that I want the reader to map onto, and Louise is not the point of the scene.
The direction of the story is to get across how we can be inadvertently terrible to our fellow creatures on the earth because we are so obsessed with our own personal egoic goal states. You might want to get, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. And this is really the kind of thing where you would try both. And the other one that I would suggest would be first person. And first person limited is kind of like Larry David's whole shtick, right?
Mm.
Larry David
Yeah.
lives his life as first person limited. You can't believe nobody else can see the world the way he does.
Yeah.
And so that's his thing, and it really works well. But it's a tough call, but you can see that these choices are not small. Because the minute you start thinking about the point of view in the frame, the more specific the moments are becoming. The specificity of the action is really solid, right? So it's not like you have to make up specificity of action. You already have that, right? Now it's the specificity of the framing and the point of view. So depending upon how you experience the reading, there's a famous story called Farewell, My Brother, which is written by John Cheever. I think it's Goodbye or Farewell, My Brother. And it's so well written that you find yourself so engrossed in the narrator's point of view that after you finish reading it, it takes a while for you to understand what Cheever was actually showing you. Was someone who was kind of selfish, egoic, and was scapegoating his brother for his own unhappiness. And so that's not a thing that is like, ba-dum-bum, right? It's a thing that after you read a short story like that, you go, huh, that was weird what happened there. Huh. And then you go, oh, wow, maybe the brother wasn't the jerk. It was the narrator talking about the brother. I'm sorry to get so deep about this, but when you're talking about style is about not just this mythical writer narrator who you're pretending to be. It really goes to you. What's your point of view? What frame do you use? What frames can you employ in your own life such that you can bring them to bear in your storytelling? And once you have frame and point of view, then you can get down to the tensing of present tense, present, continue. I don't even want to get into the technicalities of tense right now because it would be pointless. and you flow. Your tenses are fine. It's not like they're crazy, but they can be modulated and tweaked to bring the kind of style to bear that you hopefully would want in a published work.
What I keep coming back to here is this is just like every question in a story. This is a theme question. It's like, what am I trying? What am I trying to show the reader, and why am I trying to show them that? And so, because every time I try to, in my head, dip down into first person, I'm like, but that's not what I want to do. I want the reader to understand this guy has no idea. Everybody else around him sees him for who he is, and he can't see himself for who he is. And so I want us to watch a guy that's acting out of that. So that's why I keep coming back to third person limited. But I can also just write it in both ways.
It's worth an investigation to try it, because you're going to, I can explain to you, I can give you some words, and I can say, this is what it'll do for you. And you'll be like, I still don't get it. He's so abstract. This doesn't make any sense. And until, as we say in Story Grid, until you jump into the pool and try them both and go, oh, I see the difference. You need to see the patterns yourself. And I'm only one person, and I can't, I can't mind meld. What I will say to you right now, I'm in the middle of line editing the shithead, right?
Yeah, my book. Yeah.
This is the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is like, I want to fix this because this is the stuff you're currently fixing in my book now.
I'm still fixing my own style. I don't even know how I write. I don't even know what I'm doing. So it's easy for me. It's not easy, but I can see what you're doing much easier than I can see what I'm doing. And that's kind of a good thing, because that's why you need a writer and editor companionship, because both the writer and the editor need to have empathy for one another and care about them reaching their goals. So this is the important thing to always, and this is what I liked about the recent video I saw that you did about the difference between coaching and working with the writer to help the writer get better versus just trying to get a scene publishable. And a lot of editors don't really care about the writer. They just want to get the thing done. And then the writer never grows because they're never challenged by their editor, and their editor just does all the tweaking and stuff. And some editors don't even do that. As long as there's green going and the action's okay, it's like, yeah, let's throw it at the wall. But that's not what I'm interested in anymore. I'm almost 60 years old. I've had enough of that, right? I wanna do things that are making writers better, with goal states beyond let's just get it published, which I don't think is much of there's no barrier anymore to that, and it's kind of silly.
Yeah, and I like the idea because the goal state is getting it to the point that it's a publishable work, but in a way that's just a device we're using to push me. So that's why I start thinking I should just write a first-person limited version, a third-person limited version, and I'll probably learn a ton, which is the whole point of doing this in the first place. I'm not on like some publishing deadline.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the problems that you have now are very high-order problems, right? So they're not anywhere near the problems that you used to face 15 months ago, when I would explain to you what valence language was, and you would say, I don't understand the difference between scrappy and bad. So now, so these are higher order problems, and they're more complex, and they require more energy to try and wrap your mind around, because points of view and frames and tenses are abstractions, and they are at the highest level of abstractions of our ability to make it through the world. Space, time, and essence. I mean, this is not small stuff. So what I suggest is you try both and then pick one, because I'm not going to read two.
Well, I can't feel too bad about that. Shawn liked the scene. I'm not making the same mistakes I used to make in my writing, and now I've got an exercise to work on in order to figure out what kind of writing style works best for me and my story. We'll pick this back up in part 3 in the future, but for now, if you really want to figure out your style, you've got to understand your theme, and that video is on your screen right now. So click that and watch it next. If you want to know more about who I am and how StoryGrid works, that info is down in the description. But for now, thanks for watching, thanks for being a writer, and I'll see you next time.